Hello and welcome to the GM overview for the Curtain Call Adventure Path for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. For those new here, my adventure overviews are divided into two parts. In this first video, I will discuss the themes and general story of the campaign, but it will be objective and somewhat light on spoilers, especially regarding the adventure's final act. This is so GMs can get an idea of what the adventure is about, but not spoil so much of it that they wouldn't be able to enjoy the adventure as a player should they watch this and then decide not to GM it themselves. My next video will be for those GMs who want more information. There I will present my personal thoughts about the adventure as well as provide full context for parts of the stories that are missing from the Part 1 video. In the Part 2 video, I will also answer questions that are posted to the comments section here. And I should also mention that Paizo did provide me copies of these books. Curtain Call is a 3-book adventure path that takes players from 11th to 20th level, and this campaign assumes that you actually played from 1st to 11th level, or at least have played prior to jumping into this adventure, as opposed to making fresh, brand new 11th level characters just for this campaign. The reason for this is Curtain Call revolves around an opera being produced that tells the tale of the party's heroics from 1st to 11th level. For example, if they previously played Abomination Vaults, then the opera will focus on their explorations beneath Otari and their heroic confrontation with Belcora. The Curtain Call Player's Guide provides some insight on how to craft the story that will be the basis for this opera, not only if it was a published adventure path, but also if it was a homemade adventure as well. The Player's Guide will also assist your players in selecting their persona traits. In Curtain Call, each player will select a public persona for their character. Regardless of how they actually think or act, this represents how the public views the character. Are they the team leader, the scholar, the scoundrel, the flirt, and so on? Throughout the campaign, different NPCs react differently to the players depending on their persona traits. Book 1, Stage Fright. The adventure begins an unspecified amount of time following the climax of their previous adventure, and the party has learned that the main villain of that previous adventure has returned. For simplicity, the adventure refers to this villain as the Nemesis, but you will need to tailor that person for your game. For example, if the players previously played Abomination Vaults, then they learn that Belcora has returned once more. And if they played Outlaws of Alkenstar, then they learn that Deputy Leveless has somehow survived their last encounter with her. Whoever their previous adventure's main villain was, rumors have surfaced that they have reappeared in Osirian and are back to their evil ways. All leads guide the players to a series of caverns called the Choke. This is a 13-room dungeon crawl where the players investigate their enemy's return, overcome some haunting reminders of their past, and hopefully put an end to their nemesis once and for all. After this victory, the players will return home to kick off the adventure proper. After a little bit of downtime, they receive an invitation from a theater director named Falenta, who wishes to meet with them to turn their tales of adventure into an opera. Assuming they agree to do so, the players will travel to Kintargo, the Silver City featured in both the Hell's Rebels and Age of Ashes adventure paths. The meeting with Falenta plays out as an influence encounter where the players have 4 rounds to impress the theater director with their favorite works of art, most significant memories of adventure, details about their nemesis, and thoughts on being the subject of an opera. The result of this meeting will likely lead to the players needing to audition for Falenta to prove they are in fact the heroes they claim to be. This audition plays out as a series of tests to assess their knowledge, personalities, and skill. For example, the players are placed within an illusion of a cargo ship burning around them and must deduce a way to extinguish the fire before everything is lost. During these trials, the players will begin accumulating production points, which are a form of victory point used to determine how successful the opera will ultimately be much later in the campaign. Following their audition, Falenta begins writing the opera, and asks the players to perform a few tasks suitable for their new roles as co-producers of the production. The first of these responsibilities is securing a venue for the opera, which will require the players to attend a grand and opulent party to convince a priest of Shaylin to allow them to perform the opera in Falenta's favorite venue. This is an elaborate influence encounter that plays out over 4 hours that include an art show, dancing, a feast, and an auction. 10 pages of the adventure are dedicated to this challenge and will allow the players to impress some influential people within the city and earn some production points before moving on to a second, separate influence challenge that specifically addresses their need for a venue. And in the final chapter of Book 1, Falenta asks the players to travel to a nearby island to meet with an odd sort of benefactor and cover an old debt. This calls for the players to investigate a warehouse and retrieve some stolen valuables. This turns out to be more elaborate than one might expect and requires a 10-room dungeon crawl before the stolen goods are secured and Falenta's old debt is settled. Book 2, Singer, Stalker, Skinsaw Man. With a venue secured and old debts settled, Falenta turns her attention to casting a star for the opera. She wants a famous diva named Oriole to play the show's villain, but there's one slight problem. No one knows where Oriole is. They left the stage and retired some time ago, and no one knows where they are now. So the first chapter of Book 2 is devoted to investigating Oriole's whereabouts and securing them as the show's lead villain. This starts as a research encounter where the players interview people involved in the theater as well as those with their ears to the street to earn research points. With enough research points, they will eventually make contact with a friend of Oriole's who can point them to where the performer has retired, an archipelago famous for piracy known as the Shackles. All seems easy enough until the players arrive at Oriole's home and find it under siege by an army of Fae. Breaking the siege and entering the estate will require the players to perform acts that reduce the number of siege points the Fae have, and also need to circumvent Oriole's own magical defenses too. This plays out as a 14-room dungeon crawl that ends with the players encountering the leader of the Fae forces and presenting those players with two options, one of diplomacy and the other of violence. One way or another, once the Fae siege is dealt with, the players will meet Oriole, who asks them to prove their devotion to the craft of theater and try to reignite some spark of joy left in them by putting on a short improvised play. Mechanically, this is a chain of skill challenges that include setting the scene, dealing with hecklers, changing costumes, and incorporating a dance number, among other tasks. The players will need to progress through a total of 11 of these challenges to complete their performance. Once the players complete their performance, Oriole agrees to play the villain in their opera and returns to Kintargo with them. The next task Falenta assigns to the players is to secure funding for the production. An opera of this magnitude will need costumes, sets designed, advertising, and more expenses before it can be brought to audiences. To accomplish this, the players will need to secure a number of sponsors for the play. 8 potential sponsors are included in the adventure, including a familiar face if the players have visited Kintargo before. Securing their support plays out as mostly typical social encounters with a few fun twists. For example, one sponsor will only agree to give their support if the players agree to give a starring role to their daughter. Securing these sponsors award production points, and once funding is in place, the players can see to the remaining pieces of infrastructure that's needed. Casting, hiring a composer, building sets, special effects, and so on. Each of these tasks call for some manner of victory point challenge, as well as decisions to be made such as what kind of composer should be hired, one who is experienced with dramatic music or one who writes comedic songs. Securing a seamster will be a little more difficult and require the players to venture into a dangerous grove to retrieve a rare flower for making dyes. A few other special events are sprinkled throughout these activities, such as investigating the cause of a damaged set and mediating a dispute between performers. Once all this work is complete, the opera can begin rehearsals. This again is presented as a series of events that call for skill checks and investigations, such as providing insight into costumes and tracking down the source of a haunting. Just when the players think their work is done and everything is in order to bring their opera to life, the unexpected happens. Oriole, their star performer, goes missing, and the third chapter of Book 2 details the players' efforts to find them. This is no simple task, as it will require them to overcome an investigation, a chase scene with 9 obstacles, and a dangerous gambling hall to locate where Oriole has gone off to. All roads lead to a 14-room dungeon crawl that I won't describe in detail here, other than to say it likely connects to the events of the God's Reign prophecy, and check out my next video if you want all of the spoilers I'm omitting here. Book 3, Bring the House Down. Back in Cantargo with their star safely returned, the players must now contend with the dreaded Hell Month. Only a few weeks to go before the premiere, there is still much work to do. This plays out as another series of skill challenges and other tasks such as managing invitations for important guests, finishing costumes, performing a consecration ritual for the opera house, helping a struggler performer regain their confidence, choreographing the climactic stage battle, and so on. Then, finally comes opening night and the players perform their opera to a packed house. Surprisingly, this uses a modified version of the chase rules from GM Core, with each of the play's 3 acts presented as a separate 4-obstacle chase scene. Normally in a chase scene, the number of players dictates the number of rolls that can be made to overcome each obstacle, but in this version, it is the number of production points the players have accumulated throughout the campaign that decides how many times they can roll. Overcoming these challenges awards opera points that quantify how impressed the audience is with the show. And that's where I will end this overview. As mentioned before, I never discussed the final act of the campaign in these Part 1 videos, but suffice to say the opera has a climax that no one in the audience will ever forget. So there you have it, an overview of Curtain Call for prospective GMs. I will be following up this video with another that shares my personal take on the campaign, so be sure to share any questions you may have in the comments, and I'll try to address as many of those as I can. Just keep in mind that I have not played this campaign, I've only read through it, so I may not be able to answer some things such as encounter balance. The second video will also discuss some of the spoiler material I left out of this video. And as always, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who supports me, whether that's by clicking the like button, subscribing to the Patreon, or subscribing to this channel. Thank you for all of your support. With that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.